Welcome back on stage, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm super excited for this session with David, Lauren, Robert, and Maurice. We'll talk about the future staffing agency tech stack. So I'm handing over to David to run the sessions. Don't forget to ask questions. Enjoy the session, guys, and talk to you later.
Thanks, Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Jan.
I think first and foremost, just like to say, I think the overall all the sessions I've seen so far have been phenomenal. So the bar has been set quite high. So, but happy to say we've got, I think, a pretty good dream team here. Goal today. My name is David Francis, research director with Talent Tech Labs, and my kind of main goal for the topic today, talking about the staffing tech stack of the future, and the limited time we have. I think there's kind of two areas I want to hit. One is, hopefully some tactical takeaways that you can use to implement in your business today. So it's not just kind of, ivory tower in the sky stuff that, you can't really take action on, but hopefully we'll give you some tactical recommendations that you can, take back and implement in your business. And then also kind of some, more or less hand grenades of thought, thinking about, what the future could look like and, potentially what some transformative technologies are going to look like as well. So with that, we're a little bit limited on time, so we'll just jump right in and start asking questions. And maybe each of you guys can kind of introduce yourselves as we as you start answering questions here. So first question I want to ask is essentially, what are going to be the highest impact areas of technology for the next 1 to 5 years? And specifically, what are the tools and technologies that staffing companies should be investing in to position themselves for success, over the next 1 to 5 years? And I think to any extent that you can, maybe tailor your thoughts around, maybe smaller staffing operators versus mid-size versus, kind of larger global players, would be helpful. So, Maurice, why don't we kick off with, or anyway, Lauren, why don't we kick off with you?
Ladies first.
Yeah. Ladies first. So, I work with small, mid-size, and large firms, and, there are differences in what they're pointing towards in 2021. If you look at the data, right, there's a lot of focus on self-service. There's a ton of focus on automation, but what's being automated is going to be different for the small, medium, and large. Wellness and diversity and inclusion, non-biased type of searching mechanisms are going to continue to be a part of the conversation. And as we continue this work from home, that whole wellness and any technology focused on ensuring the wellness of an end user or an employee is going to be really, really important. And I have to say, with self-service comes, on-demand shift management. This putting the candidate in control of their future is like the root of the desire here and kind of the passion behind why I think this has been so successful. And dare I say, VMS and MSP are poised for significant disruption as we move into 2021 and looking for betterment of that overall process, because I think it's got a lot of friction, and I think it's poised for some improvement. And the training and upskilling, that's kind of a no-brainer, because our workforce needs it. They're asking for it. They're crying for it. And all of this technology can't come without an adoption plan. So if there's anything that you're going to take away here, guys, is we're small, medium, large, no matter what the size, if you don't have a good business process, change management, and adoption plan, then it's all just pretty jewelry sitting in your drawer.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other follow-up thoughts from Maurice or Robert?
Did I say all the words?
I was going to say you covered that. It was pretty comprehensive.
I said all the words, but the two of you, we talk all the time.
I think, Maurice, you want to go first? I think that definitely have some things to add, but
yeah, absolutely.
Well, I would pick up from where Lauren left off, where she was talking about change process and a plan. I think that's imperative for staffing firms to really have a vision for where they're headed and have a roadmap. And also, I think as staffing firms evolve into technology firms, they need to have that same kind of mindset around innovation and a process internally for adopting innovation. I think currently a lot of staffing firms sort of think about technology as something that you do occasionally, like you add some technology, but it's really a continuous thing. And if you look at how technology firms operate, they're continuously improving every facet of their business, and they have a process that drives that innovation. So first and foremost, I think it's the core of the DNA of the future staffing firm is in this innovation process and an agile process. And then that will lead to the process improvements and the technology that will take them into the future.
I guess there's I was going to say just a real quick flavor of this, which is thinking about, you kind of hinted at it, I think, Maurice and Lauren, basically thinking about like digitizing your existing process that you have now. So you've got some process that's manual and then you want to digitize it, versus thinking about, essentially creating something, either an entirely new business model or kind of rethinking or re-envisioning what that process looks like to just be more effective in the future.
Yeah, you're not going to take old analog processes and digitize them. You're just not. That would be silliness.
Yeah. So Lauren and I talk about this every week, or every time we talk, which is pretty frequently. So I sell technology to the staffing space, and my favorite thing, David, is one of the companies I used to work for. We had a slide in our pitch deck that was the Domino's pizza slide, and Domino's went from being a takeout pizza place to a technology company that served pizza. And that is what I recommend to people. It's like, how do you be a technology company that does staffing as opposed to a staffing company? And we're traditionally, we love being brute force. And it's a great, very great industry, serves a great purpose, but we're just always traditionally very brute force. And so that is definitely on the menu. See what I did there? But
I get you.
The one thing I wanted to highlight too, for technology companies, is think about what and I said this to you the other day, David. Think about what SaaS sales companies are doing. How are they operating? What technologies are they using? And then figure out. And it might be hard for smaller operations because they're expensive. I remember talking to a 10-person firm. They wanted to buy Outreach.io, which is like $1,000 a user. So it's not doable on a small scale unless you're buying it in bulk. But there is a lot of value in looking at what these SaaS or these sales organizations that are really big are doing, and then figuring out how it can work for you, or like planning for it. I mean, you may not be able to purchase it now, but you can start to plan for it and implement manual things that can kind of help and get you there until you can actually scale or grow or get some funding to do that. So yeah, I wanted to highlight that.
That's such a great point, Robert, because there is a way to take your tech stack and have each investment sort of pay for the next, right? Get the one with the lowest hanging fruit that has the opportunity to generate revenue for your organization, implement that, and then move, and then plan for the next one, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. There's a really easy way to execute on, a technical buying roadmap. If you choose the ones that have the lowest hanging fruit from a revenue generating perspective.
Yeah, I just to build on what you were saying, Lauren, I think there's really distinguishing from a financial point of view where you're going to get the highest ROI, and because there's so many opportunities now, there's never been more opportunities than there are today to invest in technology and to improve the financial results. So it's really looking at all the opportunities and sorting the top ones to the top and focusing on that. But then there's also this, like, which ones do you do first? Because sometimes you're laying a foundation of technology that you can then build on. So it's also sequencing the technology in the right order, which is I think that's the art of it. And too often we're distracted by, whatever the latest thing is that we're seeing or the vendor that we're talking to. It's seeing the big picture, looking at all of the opportunities, and then prioritizing them based on strategy and based on financial impact.
Oh, you're so right. It's so easy to see the shiny object. Oh, I need a bot. Well, if you don't know how to teach the bot about your good flow and business, your good workflow and business process, we're just teaching it bad things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can totally get caught up in that. And I think a challenge to every technology out there And what every business, small, medium, or large, needs to identify before they invest is, what is the metric for success? How will I know if it has been adopted, and how will I know what the tangible ROI is? And if your technical, offering can't answer that and give you a metric, then think twice.
Yeah. And on metrics, one of the things I'm really interested in is what are the metrics for the future staffing firms as we become technology firms? What are the metrics that we're going to start paying attention to? And what are the metrics that will become less important to staffing firms? So and the way we measure success, I think, is going to mirror increasingly, e-commerce companies, for example, as opposed to traditional staffing firms.
I think it's going to be more focused on results and less focused on how we got there. Whereas before it was more, activity. And yes, activity does equal results. There is a, just sort of a basic formula to getting results, but I think we're going to concentrate a little bit less on that, and look more to the end result. We don't really care how you got there. We just want you to get there.
Well,
sure.
I'll jump in and say that from the panel before, the remote work panel, when you move remote, it's all about results.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Having the manager, like, number one, I lived in Miami and I hated driving. I don't like driving. So I've worked remote the last 3 years and I've been super productive. But, the one thing that it's very easy to see is the activity, is the results, right? You can see that, and you have to have the right tool in place to see that. And then the metrics, Maurice, to your point, is it has to be updated because they might be different. They might, you might not be, making 100 calls. You might be on LinkedIn, right? You might need to be able to track the activity on LinkedIn, track the activity on different platforms. Yeah. How many times did you, Lauren and I love to talk about social selling. So how are you engaging on that social media platform? And again, this goes back to my original point. These are all things that really successful salespeople do. And recruiting is obviously a sales job, and we might be moving out of that as we get to more on-demand platforms, but we're not there yet. Even though we got sped up 5 years, we're still not to the point where it's still a sales job at the end of the day. So we can still use those mindsets and metrics.
And that's why every business, small, medium, and large, what do I say every time, Robert? There is no transformation without integration. In order to see all of this beautiful activity that your end users are out there achieving on a daily basis, you got to be integrated. You got to be able to see it. And I'll probably never stop saying that.
All right. By the way, guys, we haven't let David answer this question. We just rambled on. So
totally cool. I'm moderating. You guys are supposed to be the ones bringing the wisdom, and I'll just disagree if you're wrong.
Yeah. I don't know. Is that a good natural breaking point for that topic? How to serve?
I think so. Yeah. I think that's great. A couple just the quick maybe big picture tactical things to I call out. One note on this side, we're going to get into later, kind of this, the online staffing model or the digitization of kind of how you deliver, staff. But, we call all those kind of platforms deployment systems, and they seem to actually work really well for smaller operators. And there's a big implementation kind of component to making those things work. And, one thing we've seen kind of almost counterintuitively is that, even though big companies have some of the in the spotlight use cases, the smaller companies that have adopted that have basically been able to kind of monopolize their own local market, and they can, more easily kind of make the technology work kind of company wide because it's just a smaller organization, and so easier to get kind of internal buy-in and whatnot. So that's been a really great area of success. And I think as you're kind of a mid-size growing company, part of the focus needs to shift from kind of just posting on, say, job boards and the like, to kind of nurturing your own internal communities. One of the technologies to support that is a candidate relationship management system. So you're basically trying to build your own kind of internal communities of applicants. Apply some recruitment marketing, keep those folks engaged and deployed at the kind of right opportunity. There's some interesting work around assessments, and I think for the large kind of global players, what's going to move the needle here? One, there's some maybe existential threats to the business to consider. Just how is how are kind of candidate preferences going to change, and what does a staffing firm kind of the future look like? But some more, I guess, maybe tactical things you can kind of set up. I think for proactive sourcing, there's with advances in kind of AI and specifically conversational AI, I think there's a world where most of the kind of just top funnel pure kind of candidate sourcing and initial engagement is handled by some form of a bot, and all the kind of higher value added activity is going to be handled by a recruiter, which I don't think is going to go away. And I think in the future that's going to differentiate essentially the winners and the losers, is who does that that last mile bit the best.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Some questions. Go ahead, Maurice, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah. So yeah, I think sort of to get back to your original question on for small, medium, large, I think if you're a smaller firm, I think you're going to see the best traction from automation and digital marketing. And then also we think mobile apps will be like really the defining shift in our industry during this decade. And especially in the light industrial and clerical space, moving into healthcare, and then ultimately moving into our entire industry. And then on the conversational systems and bots, to your point, that is going to be a huge change. And we're seeing, for the first time, some really significant breakthroughs in that area where virtual recruiters can engage with candidates effectively and replace large parts of what recruiters are doing. So that is going to transform our industry as well, where the bots are taking over more and more of the work. So in the mid-level, mobile conversational systems, hyper automation, again, but the big firms, they're investing everywhere in every trend that exists, from AI, data engagement, autonomous staffing, every trend they're investing in. So I think you're right. It depends on what size that you're at in terms of what investments make the most sense and where you'll get the most ROI.
So thanks, Maurice. David, so there were some good questions in the chat. So first, someone asked all the best tech stacks, or what are the best tech stacks for small, medium, and large? That's a very big question, guys.
Yeah.
It's on who you talk to.
Message me, Lauren and Maurice, and or go to Talent Tech Labs and talk to those guys. Those guys have a lot of it, but you could talk to us and we can help you based on your size and what you're trying to do. And then there was someone who asked, what do you do if you can't afford a tech stack? And there's a lot of free tools. So again, reach out to Lauren, myself, Maurice.
And look, there's a really great way for young, smaller agencies to get in and try something that's in beta, to try and get engaged with a startup when they're trying to iron out some of the wrinkles in the technology. That is an amazing way for a scrappy young firm to partner with a scrappy young technology to help figure it out together. And so it doesn't have to be expensive. It really doesn't. And there's a big misnomer out there that my tech stack is going to cost me, thousands upon thousands of dollars a month. And it really doesn't have to. If A, you partner with the right technologies, and B, you have a roadmap that makes sense and helps each technology pay for the next, it can be done. It can be done.
Yeah, I agree. Partner up with Lauren, myself, Robert, and we'll set you straight and help you put together a tech stack. And the roadmap, I agree, Lauren, super important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suspect at some point the beginnings of this are starting to happen already, just kind of organically via everybody's kind of separate needs to kind of integrate different systems. But like in the coding world, they have this concept of an actual like tech stack where it's like you've got your back end is this, your front end is this,
QA.
And your database. Yeah, so you've got like these kind of established kind of technologies that just naturally work together really well. And what's probably going to happen in the next few years is some of this is happening through like ecosystems, like Bullhorn's ecosystem, or the way that Salesforce has an ecosystem. Essentially, ecosystems of technologies that work together really well. What hasn't happened is they haven't really ever been sold like in a bundle. which is probably the next evolution.
Oh my
so,
goodness.
If
don't go there. We hear about that a lot.
Oh my God, you have no idea how many times I've said to Bullhorn, it's like AT&T, make it cheaper if it's a bundle, and because it makes sense. But you're seeing, the Herefish, and now they've got Bullhorn One, and there's so much happening on the Bullhorn side. And I do try and when I'm building a stack, stay with a core, central system of truth that integrates well with everything else around it, whether you are in Salesforce, whether you go PaaS or SaaS. And that's where the conversation is evolving now too. It's not just about stacking software as a service. It's about platform as a service, and what type of configurability and scalability do I have if I go that direction, kind of the red pill, blue pill conversation. And so the more technology that people have, the more they want, and we need to be prepared for that. Yeah,
that's a good point. I mean, also when you think about it, if you look at what an ATS was 10, 15 years ago versus today, what you're buying today in an ATS is really already a bundle of all kinds of things that used to exist outside of the ATS that have been brought in as services that you now get as part of that package. And you will see more and more of that bundling.
Yeah, agreed. I 100% agree with you.
All right, cool. So I think, it's a good time. We've got, we've answered the first question. Congrats. Let's talk about high impact areas of automation. So, automation's happening across multiple industries, and the staffing industry is no exception. Question is, most staffing companies have realized there's some value to this. And so, looking at the processes that can be automated, what is going to be the highest impact from an ROI perspective? I think Bob, Robert, given your expertise, let's hear from you. Let's get your thoughts here first.
So high impact automation. Well, you gotta start with your database, right? And making the most out of your database, which is figuring out who you're engaged with and who you're not engaged with. I think that's a good place to start. So most value you're going to get is that. Second, and I'll try to I'm going to steal all of your talking points. The second one is some kind of autoresponder that keeps people in the loop, whether that's if they applied. You can't have someone hit your ATS and not get something from you. That is a terrible experience. You can't submit somebody to a job, to a client, and then let them fall into a black hole. You cannot do that. You can use automation for those. These are the things that we were talking about for the last 3 years, with the Senses and the Herefishes of the world. So I love those. And then I'll say the last one of high impact, maybe this is more enterprise, and I'm going to just kind of plug this, is being able to move data with clicks and not code. So getting involved with more of these citizen automators, where you can plug in your general ledger or your payroll system very easily from the from the ATS or from whatever system. Patrick, this is kind of answering your question. Patrick threw a question in about tightly integrated or not. I think the answer is still more tightly integrated and not all being in the same system, if I'm answering your question correctly. But I think that there has to be a way to move data that doesn't require your team or the technology team to build endpoints. So anyway, sorry, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, there's a pretty huge kind of revolution going on right now with the kind of broad term for the category is called no-code tools, and it's basically automation builders and citizen developers are basically people that work at your company that know your own internal processes but aren't developers. And you can give them one of these no code platforms that they can basically build, automations themselves.
Right. And with more technical conversions, there's RPA happening. There's so much going on to make that easier, and get bots involved in some of that administrative work. And, from my perspective, look, focus the people on revenue and relationships, and focus automation on the administrative and the repetitive tasks that really detoured us traditionally from revenue generating activity. And, Robert's 100% right. You spent at any given point, you're spending an average dollar amount on a candidate that comes into your database. Don't let that be wasted money. And I get so upset when I see databases that have millions of people in them, and there's this really dismal redeployment rate. And that's your bread and butter right there. You spend all of that time, all of those resources, and all of that money. And so let's focus your automation on making the most of that.
Redeployment. How about just talking to people that are in your database?
Nurturing a relationship, for goodness sake. Yes, 100%.
So yeah, I agree with everything Robert and Lauren have said on the automation side. When I go into a staffing firm and I sit down, I virtually sit down with a recruiter or people that are involved in the staffing processes, I'm astonished at how manually intensive our business is today. There's so many steps involved and so many things that people have to do. And when you look at the process, there are so many opportunities for automation. I recently sat down with a group, again, virtually, and within 20 minutes, we had come up with 50 different opportunities to automate their various processes. And I'm quite confident if we had continued on, we would have come up with 200 ideas. So when you have 200 opportunities for automation, where do you start? Well, I think to Lauren's point, you align it with the finances of the business. What's going to drive profitability, and so you see that in two areas primarily. One is at front end of hiring. So how can we use automation to make more placements and speed up the whole placement process through, as Robert was saying, like through engagement, staying in touch with candidates. All of those kind of things are going to lead to more placements. The second part is retention. So how can we use automation to retain better, and raise employee satisfaction, drive more referrals, and then certainly like this integration with VMS, like Lauren was mentioning earlier, disruption in there, lots of friction. We can automate that connection between our systems and their systems and streamline. So again, I think it's starting with hundreds of ideas, prioritizing based on strategic importance, and also where are you going to get the financial results, and then one by one systematically automating through various tools that are now available.
Right. And it doesn't have to be, you're 100% right. And it doesn't have to be overly complex. And I think that's what businesses walk into this going, oh my gosh, do I have to bring in, these $1 million consultants to do this giant whiteboarding exercise? It is as simple as, here's where I am, here's where I want to be, here are the resources I have, here's how much time I have to get there. And really just doing a gap analysis of, and those are the questions you have to ask yourself. And it doesn't have to be overly complex. And then I see a question here at me, is Bullhorn bundling some of the, yes, Bullhorn is bundling today. So, ask them about it. You got to. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Is the word bot is kind of scary, but
yes,
really the typical bot is just a few steps, but they're very powerful and they save a lot of time, and they can be programmed by mere mortal people within.
And please don't create 200 automations at one time. Please,
no.
For the love of all things. But yeah, you're right. Sorry, Maurice, I cut you off, but most things are 1 or 2 steps, right? That's what we would see. So, sorry, Maurice, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay, want to shift gears here a little bit. I want to jump into the whole just kind of digital offering model, basically mobile phone apps, what the future of that looks like. We think there's a lot of potential there. Real quick, just wanted to answer a question. Somebody had a question about diversity and inclusion hiring, and basically, employers trying to drive diversity spend. On the corporate side, we've actually done quite a bit of work around this. On the corporate side, what seems to be moving the needle is a couple of things. One, just using tools to benchmark, and sometimes you need to use like a machine learning tool, like an Eightfold or a Hire tool or something, to basically infer things like gender or ethnicity. But just knowing like what your kind of hiring funnel looks like is the first step. Second thing that we've seen has been pretty effective is there's this category of tools called job post optimization, and it's basically they just rewrite some of your job description to remove non-inclusive language and add inclusive language. It tends to only work in kind of like a larger hiring context, but for the organizations which are typically bigger that use those, that's moved the needle. And the last point I would say is I think staffing companies historically, the workforce is I think maybe over-indexed to diverse hires. And so I think to the extent you could just shine a light on that to your the companies that you staff to and say, hey, like, look, this part of your supply chain actually is incredibly diverse. Think that would actually be a good way to just elevate the industry.
I saw that question, David, and I am not an expert on that, so I'm glad you are, or you have some research.
Cool. All right. So let's, I think the last thing just for, based on time here. So yeah, let's talk about basically digital apps. What does the future look like? Adoption there's a lot of pilots going on right now. What does the future look like? Is every staffing company going to have their own app? And if they do it, is this something that they should build themselves or, license by? Get your guys' thoughts on,
go first,
on that.
Yeah, so every year we do a report on our top 10 staffing technology trends for the year. And mobile is one of those top 10 trends. And I personally think it's one of the most important trends. It will be one of the defining trends of this decade. When we look back and we see this transition of all the staffing firms onto mobile apps, that's what we'll think about is how we made that transformation. And what's interesting about mobile apps is it enables new capabilities like what we call autonomous staffing, where placements are made without recruiter involvement, or recruiterless staffing, as some people refer to it. It dramatically speeds up the staffing process, and it significantly improves that experience for candidates and employees, and even for our clients. And these mobile apps are going to become very, very powerful as phones become better, 5G, et cetera. It's simply one of the most important things that every staffing firm needs to have on their radar or start investing in now. And I would also say that it's definitely one of those high impact areas that will transform staffing.
I agree and I disagree. This is where that question that we prepared for of what's one of the unpopular views you have that people will argue with you about. And that's, I think that we have to, I agree with you that this app is such a great opportunity to put the power in the candidate's hand. It's all about candidate experience. But I also think, with great power comes great responsibility. Remember, the average candidate the average commercial candidate signs up with 4 to 6 agencies. That means we're going to require them to download 4 to 6 apps. And so I think we have to be really careful and mindful of what that interface looks like. And then secondarily, I sit right next to the Silicon Valley. So I have actually serviced against the Blue Crew jobs and serviced against the Winolos. And I'll tell you what, the one thing we have that I don't know that they're ever going to have is when stuff goes sideways, we are there, we are on site. We are there to fix it. We're there to make it better. And so there is this beautiful balance I know we can reach with this human, connection and maintaining the humanity of a very human industry and leveraging technology to make us better, faster, stronger. So it's this danger, it's this fine line that we in the industry have to walk. And so I want us to be mindful of that as we're putting our apps together. Remember that your average candidate is going to do this a number of times. And so how do we make it as easy as possible?
Yep, agreed.
I agree with, I think the human part of it is key. Like I'm a big fan of this idea of a human-based economy, everything focused on the human, right? And it's nice because I work in an industry that's really focused on the human. So definitely mobile, and definitely need to find the balance and figure out what that is. I would say, right, you said you asked buy or build, David. Unless you have a team that's going to keep you on track of the newest technologies, I would recommend, and I would say buy, not build. So
you're in staffing. You're not a software company.
Well, unless you're like one of the top 10 largest staffing firms in the world, and you can put a 30-person team or 50-person team behind it, it's going to be very difficult to keep up with the leaders in this field. So a lot of people start off thinking, oh, this is a mobile app, we can quickly create it. It's much more complex than you could possibly imagine.
Every situation where I've talked to so take an ATS, for example, guys, I've talked to like 3 or 4 companies. Oh, we're a bunch of Salesforce developers. We staff Salesforce architects, etc. We're going to build our ATS through Salesforce. 3 years later, it's live. We are a top 5 company. We're going to build it. We have a lot of money. 2-3 years later, it's live. So there's just, and these guys are talented people. It's just a lot of work, right? Yeah. And a lot of money. It's a lot of work and a lot of money.
Yeah. A lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of effort. And if you're prepared for that and have the funding for it, go for it.
Yeah.
I want to build on something Lauren said with the number of apps that candidates and employees will have on their phone. I mean, there's some limit. I mean, is it going to be 5 or 10? That might be one of the limiting factors. Like you have Lyft and Uber. People have 2 apps on their phone, but does it make sense for candidates to have 5 or 10? I'm not so sure. And I think this alone, as that we get more and more efficiencies out of mobile and automation, might play a role in consolidating our industry around a smaller number of very, very technologically savvy staffing firms.
I would add that something Sue said in the last panel about remote work. One, because you're remote and you're on a phone, you need to have a really strong brand so that you are the app that they want to use, right? And also taking the Amazon approach of just having killer customer service and really answering questions in a highly timely manner or immediately. So, and that's what all technology should do. So, I mean, if you're going to provide a mobile app, you need to differentiate yourself with your brand. And then that brand also has to be highly focused on customer service. Sorry, or Lauren or Maurice.
Yeah, no, those are great points.
You're spot on.
Yep.
I think I was going to say the only other kind of a couple points I would make here is even in the case where you're a global brand, building is particularly hard. I'd say your litmus test should be: are we going to be the top 1 or 2 vendor? Like looking at your technology that you're building, like can we be the top 1 or 2 in the industry building internally? And if not, and then are we willing to invest the resources on an ongoing basis to make sure that we maintain that position? And if the answer to that is no, then you're likely better off buying a tool. The other thing I'll say, I guess there's 2 kind of questions around one on adoption. It seems like one of the challenges here, I agree this is going to be the future. The biggest, it seems, challenge to date has actually been kind of internal adoption and client adoption. So, I think buying one of these systems is great, but then make sure that you have a roadmap to actually, get this in place, get your recruiters using it, and actually deploying candidates. And, to the extent that's possible, get your clients using it too. And then how kind of the overall ecosystem evolves. I agree with the point. So there's like 19,000 staffing companies in the US. If they've each got an app, like that's, from a candidate experience perspective, that's going to be impossible to manage. So there's 2 futures. There's either one where, a handful of really big dominant players, have their own branded app and that takes over the world. Like, True Blues, the Adecco's, Randstad, the True Blues, get kind of like dominant market penetration. The industry's fragmented enough. I don't think that's probably what's going to happen. There is probably going to be some, agnostic vendor that basically creates some kind of a platform that, multiple companies can participate in, and they use that technology, essentially a marketplace, but they're using, that as delivery, and, candidates, they'll go there and will basically be able to select staffing suppliers.
And that's what Australia is doing. And I think I'm watching that one closely because I think we're going to see this immense participation because they've made it easy.
And maybe it's I'm going to be joking here, but maybe it's the group that has the best memes and then jobs. So it's entertaining.
Yeah, it's actually, you're probably, to be fair, you're probably right.
Entertaining and work.
Right? Yeah,
so.
Right.
What I'm seeing is that these mobile apps are making staffing firms, along with robotic process automation, much more productive. In terms of productivity per recruiter, productivity per sales rep. And we might wind up in a situation where we have like sort of an oversupply of capacity because we can scale chatbots and we can scale virtual recruiters. And so we may not need, again, as many staffing firms as we have today, because we basically scale not by adding human beings, but we scale by setting up more services in the cloud.
Makes sense.
With that, just based on time, I think we're gonna end with that thought. Maurice, Robert, Lauren, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
I don't want to answer.
You want to come back on and take over?